This story starts with a deceased teenage girl, 17 years old. Her name is Minnie Marchman from the Ashburn, Georgia area, which, at this point in time, is a small town. It's November 14th, 1912, and Minnie's family has not been allowed to bury her yet because the contents of her stomach need to be examined. We're awaiting the return of state chemist results of those contents. If you've been with me for a bit, I bet you already can guess what they are suspicious of. Yes, I ended that with a preposition. And yes, you can bet your patootie they are looking into poison. Part 2 of this story is a young male farmer somewhere around 20 or 24, depending on the newspaper, by the name of Tan Cleghorn. He is suspected by various individuals of perhaps having done something to Minnie, and he has been out of sight for 4 days. So let's back this up. Minnie lived with her parents, the Marchmans. Now, already, the newspapers are a bit shifty with their information. It was said the mother, Maddie, was widowed, but then a few days later, the same newspaper said that Minnie's father was alive but aged. Minnie was seen by those in the small town of Ashburn as being one of the prettiest young women there and one of the most popular. Tan was said to be neat in appearance, clean-shaven, and a dashing young fellow. Tan and Minnie were friends. Allegedly more than friends. Had been seen by others as going together for about a year. Some would even say they were engaged to be married. The pair getting married was fully expected by friends and family, and they lived only a quarter of a mile apart. They were always together, attending local frivolities together. But then at some point, she avoided public gatherings, spent most of her time at home, though she and Tan would take walks together and buggy rides. The couple had reappeared out in the open and visited Ashburn together, and during their recent visit, Tan had bought some fruit and candy that he gave to Minnie. Minnie's friends would say that Tan had promised Minnie he would marry her. The whole Ashburn visit was allegedly him getting the marriage license, but he made an excuse of putting off the marriage temporarily, and it was agreed again, allegedly, that the couple would wait a few more days to be married. Minnie went back home to wait, and Tan disappeared. And within the 4 days he left/disappeared, Minnie was dead. Minnie's family was all ready to have their funeral for their daughter until the family doctor, Dr. W.J. Dixon, and friends of the family became suspicious, thought that this was all strange, that maybe they needed to look more into what was going on. Why? Well, as you can probably surmise, that sure sounds like a lovely present of fruit and candy that Tan gave her, wasn't it? Her mother, Maddie, told at the coroner's inquest that Minnie had 8 convulsive episodes within a 2-hour period before she passed away. Each episode had Minnie foaming at the mouth, appearing to have been poisoned. Minnie's mother would say that she had not seen Minnie taking any kind of medication in very recent days and that there were no poisons to be found in the house. If you aren't suspicious of that fruit and candy that Tan had allegedly given her days before, well, you should be, because everyone else is. So as already mentioned, Minnie's stomach was sent off to the state chemist's office in Atlanta. Dr. John Funky, there, great name, started the examination. At this point, again, November 14th, we're in 1912, he can't say anything definite just yet. Now, this newspaper's editor did not do a great job of reviewing this story before publishing because sentences just hang in the air, but here is what I could cobble together. There will be 2 exams, one a chemical analysis and the other a microscopic look-see. Dr. Funky, quote, I have started both examinations, that of the juices first, and while that is on, I have started the other, so that the analysis of the case is progressive. About 3 or 4 days are required to tell anything definitely. Owing to the fact that my present conclusions may be erroneous, I won't say what progress has been made thus far. In cases of sudden death, the manner of dying tells much. It might be a case of death from brain or heart or lung or stomach trouble, and in performing an autopsy, the physician would want to know how the person acted before dying." End quote. He has found out from Minnie's mother that she had suffered for 2 hours, which is important information for him to know. November 15th, 1912. Minnie Marchman, Minnie's mother, would have a chat with a newspaper reporter. According to Minnie, her daughter Minnie told her this before Minnie died. Quote, "I never want to lay eyes on Tan Cleghorn again. He has wrecked my life, and I want him to reap his just reward." End quote. According to her mother, though, Minnie would not say a disparaging word about Tan until Minnie was aware that she was dying, and then she let the fur fly. Maddie would state, quote, "I am not prepared to say whether Minnie was poisoned for the purpose of murder or possibly to hide another crime, but I'm satisfied she died of some deadly drug. I cannot say that Tan Cleghorn administered the drug himself, but I'm sure he was at the bottom of it all. He is the only person in the world who would have had the motive to harm her. And Minnie was such a good girl, too. Oh, it's terrible." End quote. Tan's mother would not comment. Tan's brother, Marion, did admit his brother was missing and that the family did not know where he was. Quote, "I know nothing of Tan's love affairs." End quote. Before Tan disappeared, he told Marion that he was, quote, "off on a little ramble." End quote. It's assumed Tan is hiding in some friend's home somewhere, but if he is caught, and if it was poison that killed Minnie, whoo, doggy, you better bet there's going to be some trouble afoot. The citizens of the area say that if Tan is caught, he should be taken to another county for his own safety. Because rather than the church bells ringing for her marriage to Tan, now they are tolling for her death. We've got some more science talk from Dr. Funky about poisons. He's not saying that's what it is yet, but he's taking us to school. Quote, "Poisons may be divided into 2 general classes, those which are corrosive or which kill the tissue, and those which are merely irritative and produce inflammation." Now, inflation is what the newspaper said, but I'm wondering if that should be inflammation. Morphine, antipyrine, acetylene, ergot, strychnine, santonin, and caffeine, however, have no immediate effect on the mucous membranes and may be neither corrosive nor irritating. Carbolic acid, bichloride of mercury, hydrochloric acid, nitric acid, sulfuric acid, and creosote are corrosive if full strength is used, and irritative if diluted. Arsenic, antimony, and cantharis are irritative as usually taken. In liquid form, arsenic may be irritative, and in salt form may or may not be corrosive. Carbolic acid in diluted form usually is more deadly than when used in full strength. End quote. November 16th, 1912. Tan's brother, a different brother, Joseph, said that he felt that Tan was probably in Atlanta and that Atlanta police should be talked to. Allegedly, Tan wrote from Atlanta and was believed to be heading to the North Georgia mountains. Minnie's sister-in-law spilled some tea, telling a newspaper that Minnie and Tan were actually engaged way back in April, the first time he had called on her, and before that she had only seen him about 3 times. The wedding was set for the week after they were engaged, but it was postponed, and would be postponed about 3 times. Her sister-in-law would say that postponement must have been Tan's fault, but, quote, "At first Minnie just laughed and didn't seem to mind the postponement. But the last 2 times she appeared greatly worried and morose. She cried a great deal. I felt sorry for her and tried to comfort her. She begged me not to let her mother know of the engagement. She was particularly anxious that she be kept in ignorance of her trouble." End quote. You know that old song, "I Put a Spell on You"? Yeah, according to Minnie's oldest sister, a Mrs. W.J. Cochran, quote, "I'm sure Cleghorn influenced Minnie to do this to save herself." End quote. Mrs. Cochran would claim to have tried to break up this relationship, but Minnie wouldn't hear it and appeared to all to be happy. Love letters between the two were being sought out as some sort of evidence. But her parents would say they couldn't find any. Perhaps they were destroyed? If there were any, that is. Let's just state for the record, there has so far been nothing nefarious detected. We're still waiting on the coroner/chemist results. The police are not actually looking for Tan just yet. One female news writer wrote of her thoughts on this kind of situation. Quote, "The belle of Amboy," Minnie's nickname, was probably just an ordinary country lass, endowed, it is likely, with more attractiveness than brains, with the same thoughts, the same impulses, the same passions of the rest of the maids of her type. Her temptations were probably no more alluring than those that beset the common run of rural maid, and the misery that followed was just the misery that is suffered by hundreds of poor, weak women each year. But there was a difference. Death came and called attention to her case. The scores of others similarly betrayed have to live through 1,000 deaths." End quote. November 18th, 1912. Tan surrendered himself to the Justice of the Peace in Amboy and also asked about the $2,000 reward. Really, dude? Interestingly, he was told that there was no warrant for his arrest, that there was no reward, and he was actually allowed to go free. He proceeded to drive to Ashburn, some 9 miles away, walked the streets openly, and shook hands with friends. He talked to a reporter and denied that he had anything to do with Minnie's death, and denied that they were engaged to be married. He denied that he had not been hiding, that he had been at his own domicile this whole time. He would state, quote, "I decided to give up today simply to show my friends and others in this county that I have not run away as has been freely reported. I have been at my home in Amboy District, making no effort whatever to hide, as I had no reason to hide. My home is but a short distance from the home of the Marchmans, and if members of that family have not seen me, it was their own fault. I could have been arrested at any time. When I heard that a reward of $2,000 had been offered for me, I just determined to set at rest all of these wild rumors of any disappearance. As to Miss Marchman, I had never even discussed marriage with her. I had taken her out buggy riding a number of times, but had never made love to her. She was a nice, pleasant girl, and I liked her as a good friend, and nothing more. And I swear to you now that I never harmed that girl in any way. I wouldn't have harmed a hair of her head for anything in this world." End quote. So what was up with that visit they took together to Ashburn? Quote, "We had drove into Ashburn that day just as we had done other times. We spent but a short time here. And then I took her home. There was nothing strange to this visit at all. As to her eating fruit and candy supposed to have been poisoned, that is all bosh. I never bought her any fruit or candy, and she never ate any. It was fully 12 or 15 days before she died that I left Ashburn." Now, let me interject here. Even the newspapers are saying between all sources, his family, her family, everyone, there are so many discrepancies about just how long he was really gone. Timelines are just up in the air and all over the place. But let's continue. Quote, "I went first to Conyers, Georgia to visit a relative, John Perkle. And after a few days there, I went to the home of Albert Perkle, another relative, in Beaufort. Then I came back home, arriving here 2 days after the death of Miss Marchman. That was the first I knew of her death. When I left here on my visit, she was not even ill, so far as I know. When I found that such a stew had been raised over her death and that my name was connected with it, I decided to stay at home until the affair was clear. But I have been placed in such false light that, in justice to my friends, I wanted them to know that I am right here, and here to stay. This whole thing has been trumped up by certain people who have it in for me. That's the whole story." End quote. So why did he surrender? Some would say because Dr. Funke had allegedly not succeeded in finding traces of poison in her stomach. Tan had allegedly been hiding in a swamp near his home, according to one of his friends. Her family heard this and were planning a search of said swamp. The friend who told of his swamp living kept Tan informed of current events. Tan allegedly said to his friend, Mr. Reed, quote, "I'm going to stay in hiding until I know what kind of report that Atlanta doctor will make. I don't intend to be taken, but if everything turns out satisfactorily, I may show myself." End quote. More from Mrs. Joseph Marchman, Minnie's sister-in-law. Quote, "She was foolish about Tan, and if he poisoned her or had anything to do with her death, she certainly did her best to protect him. I believe I was closer to her than anyone else, and never once did she say a word against him until she was on the very brink of the grave. Had she lived, Tan Cleghorn would never have had to hide out. She would have remained loyal to him, regardless of her fate. But she couldn't carry her secret into the beyond. When she felt death approaching, her love turned to hate. She had absolute faith in him and told me she was sure he intended making her his wife. She believed this until a few hours before the end." End quote. And let's just say that Dr. Funky ain't done. He will also be looking at the liver and the brain in case the stomach had already absorbed the poison by the time he received it for examination. Unfortunately, this does mean exhuming the body, which the family had buried after the stomach had been removed. I don't think her family will object. Even the local preacher is coming down on Tan during a sermon to his church congregation. Quote, "Had poor, misguided Minnie Marchman sought protection of the rock, she would have had about her frail being a shield that no man could have penetrated." In case you're confused, he is obviously not talking about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who, yes, could have provided her quite a shield. But no, he's talking about the rock of Christ. No matter with what pleasing, sugar-coated influences the devil might have tempted her. Had Tan Cleghorn been on the rock, he would have never allowed temptation to cause him to besmirch the purity and wreck the life of a young girl and bring a cloud of shame and sorrow on the good name of a family forever. For a cloud now hangs over a little country home out here that can never be removed. This awful tragedy should be a warning to others. No home is safe from the invasion of the evil one, and fathers and mothers should place their feet squarely on the rock, the Christ, and save their children and their homes. End quote. November 19th, 1912. Though we're still waiting for evidence of what caused her death, Mr. W.J. Cochran, Minnie's brother-in-law, says that poison or no poison, Cleghorn is responsible and he will be prosecuted. Tan continues to say he's innocent of everything and even says that before Minnie died, she had told him of her plight and accused another of her suitors. Now, you may have noticed some of the language in the newspapers is a little odd. I do not want to make assumptions, but I think it's easy to read between the lines that Minnie was perhaps with child, given the language of her mother, the sister-in-law, the preacher. Also, that poison could have perhaps terminated the pregnancy, or the poison was to take Minnie out of the picture, whether by her own hand or Tan's. I hate making conjectures, but one newspaper states plainly, the Keowee Courier, November 20th, 1912, quote, "It has been talked freely in the community that the girl took something to relieve her condition, and that Mrs. Marchman, her ma, knew this. It has also been rumored that Cleghorn furnished it, whatever it was, but there is no substantiation of this." End quote. Anyway, Tan offers up a letter from Minnie to him, dated October 31st, 1912. Quote, "Mr. Tan Cleghorn, kind friend, I will drop you a few lines to let you hear from me. Say, Tan, you don't know how my heart is broken this morning to think how I have been treated. Say, Tan, I have heard something of you and myself the day we went to Ashburn, so come down tonight if you can. I know you would like to know what it is. Well, I will ring off for this time as I haven't the heart to write much, so hope to see you soon. From your friend, Minnie." End quote. So let's get back to our chemist. His report to the Marchman's family doctor, Dr. W.J. Dixon, was, quote, "Up until the present time, I have found nothing in the stomach contents to account for the death of the girl, Miss Marchman. Since the stomach contains practically nothing except mucus, it is very probable that if the death was due to poison, that substance was all absorbed. In order to clear up the mystery, I would like to do a more extended autopsy or examination of the body and procure such organs in which the poison is likely to be found. I would be glad to come down to do the post-mortem examination and bring back with me such organs as found necessary to clear up the mystery. Yours truly, J. Funky. P.S. The stomach itself will now be examined if you do not see fit to have a further post-mortem examination. J.F. So it's official. They do want Dr. Funky to continue examination and the body will be exhumed." Now, oddly enough, almost 3 weeks pass of no news. December 9th, 1912. So on December 8th, the evening before this report, we got a bit of vigilante justice on our hands. W.F. Cochran, Minnie's brother-in-law, decided to take the law into his own hands and shot Tan out in the street. Tan is expected to be fine. Cochran was released on bail. Allegedly, Tan and Cochran met in a street or road. Cochran fired 2 bullets at Tan. One went through Tan's hat and the other nicked his scalp. Tan fell to the ground, whether because of the injury or if he was feigning death, and Cochran turned himself in. It would come out later that Tan fell to the ground because he ran into a tree. Another story said that Tan and one of his brothers was in a buggy, saw Cochran, hopped out of their buggy, and confronted Cochran. Cochran shoved away one of them and then drew his gun on Tan and shot. In any case, Tan will be fine. Now, what does not make sense right now is that the plans to exhume Minnie's body to examine more of her organs was abandoned. Why? I don't know. Anyway, we don't have time to answer that question because we've got a gathering of angry people who want some blood. Tan is gathering up his family and friends to get them armed with shotguns in an attempt to even the score. Cochran, hearing about the potential gunfight, is gathering up his own friends and family as well. When I read this, my first thought was, Hatfields and McCoys. And funny enough, the newspaper actually mentioned that famous feud too. You think we're done? No. December 10th, 1912. Now, the original story I saw of this was a bit different, but I'm going to go with this version. W.J. Cochran, accompanied by Minnie's brother Lee, shot Tan and Tan's brother Marion. Apparently, Cochran left his home, accompanied by Lee Marchman, and headed into Ashburn, followed by 4 of the Cleghorn brothers. According to Cochran, quote, "They have hounded me all day yesterday and today. I may have to defend myself soon," end quote. Upon greeting some friends, the pair saw the 4 Cleghorns coming up from behind, and boom, Cochran started firing, and yes, the Cleghorns were also packing heat and had guns in hand. 2 Cleghorn brothers, Tan and Marion, were taken away by doctors. The other 2 escaped into a nearby store as the shootout all happened in the early afternoon in the town. Now, originally both were declared dead, but in this newspaper, it was said that Marion was nearing death with a .32 caliber bullet in the left cheek, and Tan, who apparently is also a cat, is likely to recover from a wound to the thigh. Cochran and Lee Marchman requested peace warrants against 8 of the Cleghorn brothers. Cochran stated, quote, "My reason for objecting to this step is that I have to admit I'm afraid of them, which is not true," end quote. Deputy Jarman has arrested 5 of the 8 Cleghorn brothers. 3 of the 5 could not bond out and are in jail. Another warrant was issued for a J. Brown, Cleghorn relative, who apparently was in the immediate area during the clash but has not been located. Sheriff King arrived quickly, and Cochran said, quote, "You will not have to make any investigation as to who did the shooting, Sheriff. I did it, and I'm ready to go with you," end quote. Cochran and Marchman will be present at the so-called commitment trial before the judge coming up soon. December 13th. Well, now this newspaper says that only 3 peace warrants were served, not 5, so 5 brothers are still out and about. Apparently, Marion is not dead and is not dying, and in fact is expected to recover, which is better news than what another newspaper said, that they were both dead, then that Marion was dead, that Marion was dying, and now they're going to be okay. The commitment trial for Cochran and Lee Marchman has been postponed for now, I believe, pending on the recovery of the 2 wounded Cleghorn brothers. December 19th. Cochran and Lee Marchman have been exonerated of all charges against them. 9 of the Cleghorn brothers, I have no idea how many in total there are, but 9 of them are under peace bonds, and I think that may be including Tan and Marion. So I had to look it up. What is a peace warrant? According to uslegal.com, quote, "When a person complains in writing and under oath that he or she has just cause to believe that another individual will commit an offense against the person or property of the complainant, the court or mayor can issue a warrant to the sheriff or other peace officer commanding the officer or sheriff to arrest or take the individual against whom the complaint is made before court to answer or respond to that complaint. Such a warrant is called a peace warrant or warrant for peace. Some jurisdictions have specific laws regarding this," end quote. What is a peace bond? According to the Cornell Law School Legal Information Institute, Quote, a peace bond is a court-required surety bond or conditional fine, criminal or quasi-criminal in nature, that an individual must pay to guarantee that he or she will not commit a breach of the peace, be it through threats, public disturbance, disorderly conduct, or similar behavior, beyond annoyance or insult towards another. A peace bond carries out justice as it requires an individual to assure the public that he or she will refrain from engaging in the form of non-peaceable conduct that they would otherwise be expected to commit, deterring future harmful behavior. When a movement can show that an individual poses a well-founded threat to a potential victim, a court may impose such conduct limitations and require a peace bond that is subject to forfeiture to the adversely affected parties if the individual breaches those limitations. End quote. So, what happened? Nothing further as far as what was presented in the newspapers. That I could tell, no further investigation into Minnie Marchman's death ensued. No exhumation, no further chemical testing. Given that they presumably had no evidence of Tan giving her anything, given that they had no evidence Minnie had been poisoned to begin with, perhaps there was more to it than what the family wanted to come out into the chatty Cathy small-town public in the end, that hadn't already. And let's be honest, given the wording of some of these statements and stories. Maybe it was just all at the point that there was nothing further to be done, or nothing further that anyone was willing to have done, and it was all laid to rest. Please like and subscribe. I'll be back next week. See you.